Welcome back everybody. Today we're going to look at a game that came out on January 25th of 2024, Tekken 8. It's been about 2 months that the game is out, but I'm so backlog of all my game testing that I finally decided to do this one. So the proposed minimum requirement for this game is the i5 6600K or the Ryzen 5 1600, 8GB of memory, the GTX 1050 Ti and or the AMD Radeon R9 380X, 100GB of available space and DirectX 12. And for some reason, the additional note, they say that they guaranteed over 60 FPS stable if you leave the auto detect of hardware running. Welcome to Respawn PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. I'm starting up with Intel and Nvidia. The Intel part I have the i5 6500, I don't have the i5 6600K, but is a similar spec. So I'm going to try that out. Anyway, the game doesn't use a CPU at 100% usage, even for the i5 6500. When everything finished loading, the CPU is running in the 40 to 50% of utilization. For the GPU is the GTX 1050 Ti. This is a 4GB card, and the auto preset settings put everything at low. And they said that they guaranteed 60 FPS all the time. Yes, I don't have the exact CPU, but we're averaging 61 FPS. We're hovering in the 55 FPS in the lows and 62 in the highs. So I said this proposed minimum requirement, it's a win. They somehow nailed it, but the CPU can be lower apparently, and can be even more lower, I'm pretty sure. Since I'm not playing competitive, I decided to try high settings with FSR quality, just to have a better visual without being competitive. We get an average of 42 FPS. It's still highly playable. We're far from our 60 FPS, but it's a bit more enjoyable visually. The GPU is PEG, the CPU has still some space to work. The memory have about 1GB free to more things to do. I say it's still quite enjoyable. After that, I decided to try the GTX 950. This is a 2GB card. I know it's not part of the proposed minimum requirement, but I just want to see how it fares on a 2GB card. And with everything set at low, we get an average of 33 FPS. So the game is playable if you don't compete, or if you just have a budget PC and you just want to enjoy the game. It's doable. There's also probably some tweak you can do in the settings to gain some FPS. Now jumping to the AMD side of things, it will be the Ryzen 5 1600 and the R9 380. In my case, not the 380X, but there's about 10% difference in performance with the X variant, so keep that in mind. Anyway, you first, when you start the game, you encounter this warning that the driver is not up to date. The 380 and the 380X use the same driver, and there won't be any new driver. So the devs say this is the minimum requirement card, but also warn you that the card is out of date. I really don't know why the dev will make a card as a minimum requirement, then tell you that, warn you that the card is not supported. Anyway, you just click OK and you can still play the game. At least the game is not closing in your face and you cannot play. You bought a game and say that the card is not adequate for playing, but it's speculate in the proposed minimum requirement that it is. It will have been funny. So the result for the R9 380, we have the GPU PEG at 100%, the CPU is at the 20s of utilization, the memory is at 6.9 to 7GB of usage, and we're averaging 48 FPS. I don't know if our 10% lower performance than the R9 380X will make a big difference to reach that point, but we are on the setting of auto detect. I don't know if I can say the guaranteed 60 FPS to say I will need the 380X, so I won't argue with that, but let's try to make this card reach 60 FPS. And there you have it. You need to play with the scaling. I put it at 50% to reach 60 FPS. I'm not sure which resolution I'm playing right now. It looks like to be 720p, but we get our 60 FPS. But I had to lock it at 60. Otherwise it's become so unstable that I have so lows that it stutter. And the only information they give us is guaranteed 60 FPS without telling us at which resolution. 720p or 1080p, because it seems for Nvidia side it would be 1080p with the auto detect, and for the AMD would be the auto detect with the scaling at 50% to get the 60 FPS, but the resolution seems to be 720p instead of 1080. So they were right on the proposed minimum requirement, and probably for the AMD side they just guess what is the equivalent without even testing. On that note, thanks for watching and see you on the next one. Subscribe.